Everybody. So today we start our scatter plot unit, and we're going to start with talking about association. You've probably heard of this before in science class. You all have worked with this a little bit. So before we get started, I want you to remember that the unit we just came out of is our linear functions unit. We just came through working with slope, writing equations of lines, all of that stuff. So now we're moving into scatter plots, which is very similar to our linear functions unit, but also very different. So let's go ahead and get started. First, scatter plots are graphs that use points to display numerical data with two variables or bivariate data. Help determine if one variable has an effect on the other or if there are overall trends, patterns, or associations between the variables. So let's look at this example here. Zara surveyed shoppers at a mall to see how many items they'd purchased and the total amount of money they'd spent at the mall. She used the data to create the scatter plot shown. So the first question here, how many shoppers did Zara survey? Well, so all you're going to do there is count the data points. Each data point represents a shopper and how many items they bought compared to how much money they spent on those items. So how many shoppers did Zara survey? If you count up all those dots, you do get 16. That's 16 shoppers. Does the number of items purchased seem to have an effect on the amount of money a shopper spent? Explain. So let's look at the scatter plot. If we look at the x-axis, it represents number of items. The y-axis represents total amount spent. So it seems like as we buy more items, the people who buy more items tend to spend more money. So does the number of items purchased seem to have an effect on the amount of money a shopper spent? Yes. In general, as the number of items purchased increased, the total amount of money spent also increased. Okay, moving on. Use the table below to define 3 possible types of associations seen in scatter plots. So there are 3 possible types of association: positive association, negative association, and no association. You get positive association as one variable increases, the other variable increases. So the variable changes in the same direction. If the variable changes in the same direction, that does result in positive association. Negative association happens as one variable increases, the other variable decreases. Variables change in opposite directions. So when the variables change in opposite directions, for example, the x-axis here is increasing as the y-axis is decreasing. You do get negative association. And no association, the change in one variable has no effect on the second variable. Again, I want you to think back to our linear functions unit. Association to a scatter plot is like slope to a line, okay? So why this gets a different name, this is called association and not slope, because these don't have perfect rate of change. It just has a direction that they all seem to go. They all kind of are scattered everywhere, but around each other. So it's called association rather than slope because it's not perfect. It's not perfect. It's just associated pretty similarly. Okay, let's move on. Describe the type of association you'd expect to see between the following variables and explain. Okay, so number one, the number of shoes a person owns and the number of states they visited. Okay, so think about that. Do the number of shoes a person owns have any effect on the number of states they've visited? None. So this would have no association. The number of shoes person owns has no effect on the number of states they've visited. The two are not related at all. So if we were to put that in a scatter plot, your dots would look like this right here. They'd have no association. 2, the size in ounces of a steak and the cost of the steak. Okay, if you've ever been to a steakhouse, you know the bigger the steak, the higher the price tag. So, does the size in ounces of a steak have any relationship to the cost of the steak? Yes, the association we would expect to see here would be positive association. Because as the ounces increase, the price also increases. They're moving in the same direction. Ounces increase, price increases, has positive association. Number 3, what kind of association would you expect to see from this example? The number of days since watering a plant and the moisture level of the soil. Okay, so if the x-axis is number of days since watering the plant, the y-axis is moisture level of the soil. First day after watering the plant, the moisture level would still probably be pretty high, huh? The second day, it would probably dry out a little bit more. The third day, it would dry out a little bit more. The fourth day, it would dry out a little bit more. What kind of association is that? Very good. Negative association. As the number of days since watering the plant increases, the moisture level of the soil would decrease.